So we're learning today the Sikha of Tazria-Hachodesh in Chelek Yitzayin on page 148. This Sikha will discuss the connection of Parshas Tazria and Parshas Hachodesh, which is actually the Kviyas of this year. When it's a Shana Mu'beres, you have these two come together. On a regular year, Parshas Hachodesh does not come out in Parshas Tazria. Well, this year it's perfect, we're learning the Sikha. The Shir today we're learning will be Le'el Nishmas Rav Yosef ben Yamin ben Rab Menashe Koltman. Let's begin. Shabbos Parshas Hachodesh is Chal L'Fa'amim. So the Parsha of Hachodesh, which is the last of the four Parshas that we read. We begin with Parshas Shkolim, then Zacher, then Para, which is this week, and then we're going to do Hachodesh this upcoming Shabbos. So Parshas Hachodesh falls out sometimes as a V'haintig Yar, like this year, B'Shabbos Parshas Tazria, in the Shabbos that we read Parshas Tazria. Alle in Yanef and Teire sind B'diuk. Everything in Teire is precise. Is von dem Gufe, was die beide Parshas kommen zusammen. So from the fact that these two come together, Tazria and Hachodesh, is mochach, it's clear, as sie haben zwischen sich eine Kudem Mishetefes, that they must have some point that is related between them, between one another. If they would have no connection whatsoever, weil Teires Emes, sie nit mechabe gewinnt zusammen. Teire, which is the Teire of truth, and everything is truth, even the fact that they come together occasionally, it wouldn't even happen occasionally that they should be connected together. But at first glance it would seem, as nit nor haben sie nit keine Kudem Mishetefes, not only do they not have any point that's similar between them, nor adarabe. On the contrary, they seem to be, Tazria and Hachodesh seem to be opposites from one another. Why is that? Parshas Hachodesh, so what is the theme and the content of Parshas Hachodesh? Vert angerufen al shem dem pasuk. It's all because of the first pasuk that we begin, that it says Hachodesh hazeh lachem reish chadashim, that this month is the first of the months of the year. What are we referring to? Chodesh Nisan, the month of Nisan. Was in Yana is Chodesh HaGeula. Nisan is the month of redemption. Wie es kommt in ganzen milmaila. And what kind of redemption are we speaking about? When Yidden were redeemed from Mitzrayim, this was a revelation that came totally and purely from above. The Yidden at that point were not worthy of being redeemed, and Hashem came and took them out of Mitzrayim. Kedivrei Razal, as the Medrash says, as of them gate, Kol Doidi Hini Zeba. Regarding the month of Nisan, the pasuk says that the voice of my beloved comes. Which means that our beloved Hashem comes from above. He comes from his own initiative from above to take Yidden out of Mitzrayim. Nachmer, is ba in anoifen von medalik. The Eibishter comes in what kind of manner? He doesn't even come gradually on a level that the entity, the Yidden below, are able to accept him. So even when it comes from above, it could be in such a way that there's a keli, that you could accept that revelation. It comes as a dilug, which is dilig alakates. The simple pshat is that Eibishter came ahead of time to take Yidden out of Mitzrayim before they spent 400 years in Mitzrayim. Or it really means Basarusa de La'ela. It was a complete inspiration from above, from the Eibishter's initiative, that he decided that it's time and he took Yidden out of Mitzrayim. Even though the Yidden were not worthy and were not ready for this at all. But the Eibishter jumped and came and took Yidden out of Mitzrayim. That's the theme that we could see in Parshas Hachodesh, right in the beginning, in the first pasuk of Hachodesh Hazeh Lachem. Was the far wird die ganze Parsha angerufen Parshas Hachodesh. The entire Parsha, with all the psukim that follow, are all named with this name of Parshas Hachodesh. Hagam, as not ein pasuk in Onayv from the Kriya, red wegen Hachodesh, even though it's only one pasuk at the beginning of the Kriya that speaks about the Hachodesh, the month of Nisan, being the first of the months of the year. Und die übrige Psukim reden wegen die Dinge von Korban Pesach v'chulu. The remainder of the Psukim of this Parsha speak all about the halachas of Korban Pesach. So seemingly, maybe we should call it Parshas Pesach, not Parshas Hachodesh, but we call it Parshas Hachodesh, which is a name for all the following Psukim. Because this is really the point, that the theme of Hachodesh and the theme of the Korban Pesach are really all one and the same. Korban Pesach is al shem u'pasach havaya goyim. Where does the name Pesach come from? It's because the Eibishter skipped over the homes of the Yidden by Makas B'chayris. Was weist, which also indicates this inyan, oif der geula was kommt bil diluk. It refers to the fact that the Eibishter skipped over all those reasons that Yidden should not be saved and redeemed, and the Eibishter went and decided on his own initiative that he's going to redeem them anyways. In ganzem u'mayla, as we said before, coming totally from above, from Hashem. Nigla aleim melech malchei amlachem HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ogiyalam. The Eibishter, the Master, the King of all kings, comes and redeems the Yidden. So undas, so this that we see in the name Pesach, which means to jump and skip over, is the Teichen von Hachodesh, Chodesh Nisan, versus the Chodesh HaGeula. It's the same content as the word Hachodesh, which refers to the month of Nisan, the month of the redemption. So therefore, this is the name of the entire parsha, Hachodesh. This is the theme, a revelation, a redemption that comes from above. But on the other hand, what is the content of the parsha of Tazria, which is Lashon Nekeva? Tazria means the zera of the woman. It's a feminine expression. V'erzakt fardem isha ki Tazria is. What does this refer to? Vida Alter Rebbe is mefarish. So you have the Maimer of the Alter Rebbe in the beginning of Parshas Tazria that says as follows. There's the Gemara that says, Ish mazriat chila. If the zera of the ish is what enters first, yoledes nekeva. Then the result is that the birth will be a nekeva, a girl. Isha mazras chila. But if it's the woman, the zera of the woman comes first, then yoledes zachar. Then you give birth for a zachar. That's what Alter Rebbe explains. Sorry, this is what the Gemara that says in Brachas. Now, the Alter Rebbe explains what's the significance of the zera of the ish and the zera of the isha. Who does this hint to? As ish v'isha zanen merames if HaKadosh Baruch Hu Knesset Yisrael. The relationship between Yidden and the Eibishter is also similar to the relation between a ish and a isha. So therefore, how do we interpret this Maimah Chazal regarding the relationship between Yidden and the Eibishter? Und wenn ish mazriat chila, if there's an inspiration, there's a zera that comes from above, which means that Eibishter is ma'oret chila a'iden of Avedas Hashem. It's the Eibishter that brings an inspiration from above to awaken a Yid to come and serve the Eibishter. So because this comes from Hashem's initiative and the person below did nothing, is Yeledes Nekeva. The result of the kind of level of his serving Hashem that comes from this will be on a level of an Nekeva. Which means it's a weak inspiration. The person below is not a keli for this. The Aveda is nitkim bas kayama. So his Aveda is not necessarily going to last. Azevi nashim was daiton kala. Like the Gemara says that women have daiton kala. Their opinion is kala. It's weak and it's something that can be changed. So too, this is an Aveda that is not an inspiration from below. It's an inspiration from above. Sarusa de la Eila, and therefore this can change. That's the ish mazriya. But if it's the zera of the isha that comes first, so beruchnius regarding Yidden, what this means is the when it all begins with the person's initiative and with his inspiration that he works on himself from below, dan yeled zachar. So then this kind of a connection to the Eibishter brings about a connection which is like a zachar, which is the Aveda is a bas kayama. This is a kind of a connection in Aveda which will be lasting, which will be firm and strong. That's what Alter Rebbe explains. So what do we see over here? When it says Tazria, was lefize, weist der Teichen from Parshas Isha ki Sazria, that we're talking over here about an inspiration from below, from the Isha, which is the Yidden. So the name Tazria refers specifically to the advantage that there is in the Aveda when a person inspires himself from below. Nidvi Hachodesh was kommt momaila, which is the exact opposite of Hachodesh, which refers to an inspiration that comes totally from Hashem's perspective, from above, without a person doing anything for this. So seemingly, Tazria and Hachodesh are opposites. How could they come together in one Shabbos, in one Parsha? So the Rebbe now brings more details regarding Hachodesh Hazel Lachem, what this pasuk itself is referring to. Regarding this pasuk of Hachodesh Hazel Lachem, Zeneda Kama Pirushim, there are a few interpretations, and the Rebbe here will bring two interpretations. One is Pshat and one Medrash. Al derech hapshat, the simple pshat of this pasuk is as follows: the Even Ezra is masber der inyan von Chodesh und Shana. What is the difference between the term Chodesh, which refers to the month, and Shana, the cycle of a year, which has all the seasons in the year? And he says as follows: Mitzat mahalach halavana, the cycle of the moon, which is what creates the existence of the months of the year, is b'chlal neda the gedef and shana. There's no concept of a year. There's nothing that separates and divides the seasons of the year based on the cycle of the moon. Ein l'levana shana klal. For the cycle of the moon, there is no such a thing as the seasons of a year. The whole concept of a year. V'alam dem sivav alavana, when it comes to the cycle of the moon, is kentik nar dem optel fu chadashim. All you see is the moon and the way the moon starts off small and it gets larger, then it gets small again, which is based on the position of the moon in contrast to the sun and the earth, and therefore you have that cycle that repeats itself every month. Yeda Chodesh, it repeats itself every month. Chav tes yom, it actually is not full 30 days, it's 29 days. V'chatzi, 29 and a half days. Ubeis Yadis Shah, another 2 parts of an hour. Va'ayin Gimel Chalakim, and another 73 Chalakim, which are much smaller parts of an hour, like similar to seconds, but it's even smaller than seconds. So the point is that you have the cycle of the moon that takes about 29 and a half days. Kommt vor a full sieve von der Levane, so once every 29 and a half days or so you have the full cycle of the moon. Gam benegeya lematzav achama b'yachas la'aretz. Now the moon coming back to its full circle, the full cycle, is not only regarding the earth itself, but also regarding the position of the sun, in contrast to the moon and the earth. Und se kommt der Meile der Levane mechadash. And therefore after this number of days, 29 and a half days, so you have the birth of the moon again. But in the cycle of the moon, you do not have kein prat, no detail in it, that should separate one year from another. That's when it comes to the moon. On the other hand, mitzad hashemesh, when it comes to the cycle of the sun, is nita de sugazman von chadashim. Regarding the sun, there's no such a thing as months. Ein l'shemesh chodesh klal. And in the cycle of the sun, you don't see any difference every 29 days. The sivav ashnasi von shemesh, the yearly cycle of the sun, is shin samachei yom. It's 365 days, v'shei shoyz be'erech, and about another 6 hours. Und der sivav seiner, and its cycle is ba'ofen as a shaft di dalet kufas hashana. The sun creates the 4 seasons of the year. That's how you see the difference, the fact that the sun creates a year, the full 4 seasons of the year, and after those 4 seasons are over, it repeats it again. Depends how close the sun is to the earth or how far it is. Aber in sein Mahalach, in the cycle of the sun, is nitok kein prat was schaffen die Gvulim von Chadashim. There is no detail that should create a boundary and a separation between one month and another. So the point is, now the Even Ezra explains what this pasuk here is saying. On their pasuk, when it tells you that you have over here these months for you, that it should be the head of the months of the year, what is it saying? Red wegen der minyan achadashim. The pasuk is telling you when you're counting the months of the year, what's considered to be the first month of the year. Was is shayich zu ashnas levana, and this is related specifically to the month of to the year, which is created by the months of the year. The months. So when do you start counting the months? K'mayim chazal as Yisrael meinen levana. Yidden count by the months of the year. When you have 12 months, that finishes the full year, which is really only 354 days, not 365 days. So when do you start counting the months? You begin counting by the Chodesh Nisan. Nisan, the month of Nisan is the first month. As a Saib Tzacham from Chodesh Nisan, Chodesh Arishin, Chodesh Nisan. That's what the pasuk here is saying. What's the concept of Rosh Hashanah? That's also the beginning of the year. Mashenkin, the Rosh Hashanah l'shanim, the Rosh Hashanah for the full year, where there's no division of months. Was the Shayach zum Shemesh, which relates to the cycle of the sun, where there's no months, is from Tishrei. That's the beginning of the year, which starts from the month of Tishrei. But so this pasuk here is telling us that there is the beginning from the months of the year, which starts in the month of Nisan. That's the pshat of the pasuk of what it's speaking about. Abeis, another pshat here of what this pasuk is saying is al derech ha-medrash. The medrash will also speak about what's unique about the month of Nisan, and in contrast to the month of Tishrei, just like the Even Ezra speaks about it. But the medrash will explain it on a deeper level according to drush. So if in pasuk Hachodesh is Elechem Geimes, Zagn Chazal, the Medrash tells us, Mishabachar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ba'ilamai, when the Eibishter chose the world that He created, Kava Bai Rosh Chodashim V'Shanim. So right then at the time of creation, the Eibishter established months, and He also established years. Then, Ukeshabachar, Yaakov Ubanav, when the Eibishter gave Yidden the Torah, or even before that, here in Mitzrayim, the Eibishter chose Yidden and Yaakov and his descendants. Kava by Rish Chodesh al Giyula. Here, the Eibishter established the month of Nisan to be the month of redemption. That's the Medrash. So over here, the Medrash is saying Nisan is established as the month of redemption. So what exactly is this Medrash saying? What's the difference between what happened at the time of creation and what happens when the Eibishter chooses Yidden? Is Masber, the Bala Akedah, the Akedah explains that Chiluk Tzevishin, Bachar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ba'olamai, Bachar B'Yakov U'Banav. What is the difference between the Eibishter choosing his world and the Eibishter choosing Yidden? Bachar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ba'olamai, when it says that the Eibishter chooses his world, meant the Anhage Tivis, this refers to nature, the things the way they are naturally. Was is eingestellt geworden in the Brie, which was established in the creation at the time when the Eibishter created the world. Und der Reish von der Anhage, when is the beginning of this behavior that the Eibishter conducts matters in the world according to nature, is Chodesh Tishrei. Rosh Hashanah, or Tishrei in general, is the beginning of Hashem beginning a new year of all the matters of nature that happens during that year. On the other hand, Bacha b'Yakov u'Banav, when the Eibishter chooses Yaakov and his descendants, meint Yanhagin Nisis. This refers to the fact that the Eibishter performs miracles. The Shidduch Ateva, when the Eibishter shatters nature. Was the Eibishter tut tzeliv Yidden, which the Eibishter does for the benefit of Yidden, Yaakov u'Banav, Yaakov and his children. Und der Reish von der Anhage, what's the Reish for this behavior where Hashem performs miracles, is a Chodesh Ezelachem. Chodesh Nisan, that begins the first month for the entire year. For the Anhaga of Nes, starts with the month of Nisan, which is a month of redemption when the Eibishter redeemed the Yidden. So that's the pshat of the Even Ezra. Of the Akedah based on the Medrash. So we have two pirushim here. We have the pshat of the Even Ezra, that we're speaking about the cycle of the sun or the moon, and the year and the month. Or we're speaking about Teva and Nes. Tishrei is the Rosh Hashanah for Teva, and Nisan is the Rosh Hashanah for the Reish of the Chadashim, which is the beginning of the miracles of the year. Now we know that alle Pirushei Razal, all different interpretations of Razal, auf demselben Pasuk, that are on the same Pasuk, or their inyan, or on the same subject, haben a Kishur zwischen sich. They are related to one another. We must say the same thing over here as well. The 2 points that are mentioned here on this pasuk, which is der Chiluk zwischen Shnas Chama und Shnas Levana, the difference between the solar cycle with the sun and Shnas Levana, the lunar cycle, and the Chiluk zwischen Anhage Tivis and Anhage Nisis, and also the second shot, the difference between the way Hashem performs things according to nature and the way Hashem performs miracles, for Zeh, Zen, and Hofchim, which are really opposites, Zen and Verbunden, Zeh, Im Zeh. So these two interpretations are related to one another. And the Rabbi explains, the Anhage Sateva, the fact that the Eibishter performed things in the world according to nature, is the Anhage versus Lo Yish Baiso. This is an Anhage where it's constant, non-stop. The Eibishter, the sun comes up on the east every day, and everything else in nature continues going tmidis, constant, on ashinui, without any change. Und das ist bedaime zum Oir u'mahalach hashemesh. And that's very similar to the way we see the sun, the cycle of the sun. Was in im is nitok kein shinuyim. In the cycle of the sun, we don't see any changes. Was das ist al derech v'de pirish in shana. That's really one of the meanings of the word shana. Shana, which means a year. What is the word? What's the root of the word shana? Von lashon mishneh. Mishnah means when something is repeated again and again. Says derselbe mahalach hashemesh. You have the same exact cycle of the sun. Was chazet sich iber noch einmal. It repeats itself again and again. It's the same sun that comes up every day. The sun doesn't gain in its size or lose in its size. It's the same exact sun every single day. On the other hand, when it comes to the concept of Hashem performing miracles, is in Anayfu from Chiddush. The point there is that Hashem is doing something that's novel. He's breaking the laws of nature, and only occasionally to something new. Was lefamim is the Eibishter mishaded yan hagas hateva lemeshach zman. Only occasionally will the Eibishter break the laws of nature for a small period of time, for a certain purpose. Das is bedaimet zu der Levana. So therefore this is compared to the moon, was the light of the moon, steht in shinuyim miyayim liyayim. It's never the same. The light of the moon on every single day of the month, it's not, the moon it starts off in the beginning of the month, like a tiny moon, a crescent, and then it gets larger and larger and larger. So it's never the same. Und wird Chadish jeden Chodesh. Every month it gets bigger and bigger. Chodesh von Lashon Chiddush. And that's actually another interpretation of the word Chodesh itself. Chodesh also means that it's constantly renewing. The moon of today is not the moon of tomorrow. It's always different. Similar to the concept of a miracle, which is also something which is occasional, and it's coming to bring a change into the world from what its constant and natural order of being would be. Okay, so we can see the connection of these two interpretations on the pasuk of Hachodesh Zelachem. However, there are some questions that we have over here on both the pasuk and on the medrash that the Rebbe quoted before. Aleph, number one, the question is, in pasuk shtei in Svei Inyanim. If you look here into the pasuk, you'll see the pasuk actually says two things. It starts off saying, Aleph, Hachodesh hazeh lachem reish chadashim. This month is the head of all other months of the year. But then Beis, it adds and says, Rishain hu lachem lochatshe hashana. It's the first of the months of the year. So it adds chatshe hashana. It adds mentioning the year. As Chodesh Nisan is nit nader reish chadashim. It's not only the head of the other months of the year, which is the point that the Even Ezra said, that it's specifically the head of the months of the year. Not oich de rishin gaimel chatshe hashana. The pasuk seems to repeat again, and it seems to be saying that it's also the head for the months of the year, related also to the year. Let's not move on. So the question here is, since over here, as the Even Ezra points out, we're specifically speaking about the month which is related to the cycle of the moon, unein l'levana shana klal. As the Even Ezra says, when it comes to the moon, there is no concept of a year at all. Is wie sagt man, how can you say, as Nisan is the Rishain, that the Nisan is the first, oich b'shayches zu inyane chatshe yashana, not only to the other months of the year, but also to the months related to the actual cycle of the full year. How is the moon, or the first month of the year, related to the whole cycle of the year in general? Beis, another question here is, looking at what it says in the Medrash. Lidach Gisa, on the other hand, the question is as follows. That when the Medrash describes and says when the Eibishter chose his world at the time of creation, was is shaykh zu Tishrei, which is related to the month of Tishrei, as we said before. Vert a month. So if you look there in the Lashon of the Medrash, it mentions nitnar kava b'shanim. It doesn't say that the Eibishter established only the full year. Nor oich rashi chadashim. The Medrash says when Hashem created the world, kava boy rashi chadashim vishanim, that Hashem established the months and the year. The question is, wie kommt in der Brie Teva an Inyan von Chodesh? According to what the Akedah said, the year represents the Teva, which is at the time of creation, the nature of the world. So why does the Medrash mention over there the concept of Chodesh, which is Chiddush, Nes, which according to the Akedah represents the miracles that the Eibishter performs? So I should say, when the Eibishter created the world, he established the years, which refers to nature. Why does it mention over there Rashi Chadashim? So what do we see over here? The point is that in the pasuk, where it talks uniquely about the months of the year, it also mentions the full year, Chatshe Hashana. In the Medrash, when it talks about the Eibishter choosing the world for nature, which is related to the year, it also mentions the Chadashim, that the Eibishter established a Rashi Chadashim. So what must we say? What must we say based on this? As Chach, that even though yes, it's true, b'chlalos, generally speaking, is Tishrei verbunden mit Teva, Shana. The month of Tishrei is related to the year in general, which is the nature. On Nisan mit Nes, Chodesh. And Nisan is the new beginning for the Eibishter performing miracles, which is related to the months. So these are two different things. Is aber da a hiskalos zwischen sie. But as we see here, they are included from one another. Which means, Eichen der Bria Gufa, even within creation itself, Eider, Bachar B'Yaakov Abanav. Even before Hashem chooses Yaakov and his descendants, at the time of creation itself, which means the time of nature, when Eibush is creating the world, is Da an Inyan Funes Resh Chodesh. Already then you have the inclusion and you have a concept of miracles that exist then, which is what's represented in the Resh Chodesh. And the same is also true in the reverse. That Oivtu from Bachar B'Yaakov Abanav, when Yaakov and his children are chosen, which seemingly that's connected only to the concept of miracles, this is expressed not only by the fact that Hashem performs miracles, and therefore it's the beginning of the months of the year, but it also is expressed by the fact that there's a change that this brings within nature itself, in Shana, in the year. And therefore, the Pasuk mentions Chatshe Hashana, referring to the year in general. So that's the main point that the Rebbe will explain over here, that what is the inclusion of these two opposite things that the Eibishter does in the world. You have nature, and then you have miracles. Seemingly they have nothing to do with one another, but nevertheless we can see hinted here in the Psukim and in the Medrash that they are connected and related to one another. What is their connection? Das zu verstehen, so in order to explain this, so we must first explain dem Teuchen v'kavane pnimis and the tzvei anhagis. What is really the content and what is really the point and the deeper point of these two things, the way the Eibishter runs things in the world? Teva ones. There are things the way Hashem created it in nature, and then there's miracles. Was beides and neitik, both. Nature is necessary. Hashem created nature for a purpose. And also miracles that Hashem performs are also necessary. So they're both necessary to oisfirin kavanas abriye, to fulfill the purpose of creation. And both of them play a role in revealing the greatness of Hashem in the world. Right? So in other words, if Hashem would create only nature, and nature would be, so to speak, perfect in itself, so there's no need for any miracles. On the other hand, Hashem created a world where He's constantly interceding and doing things the way He wants, with a miraculous order and without any nature, but no, Hashem on one hand creates a world with nature, and at the same time performs miracles that shatters nature from time to time. That means that both Nes and Teva are important components in the purpose of creation to reveal Hashem's greatness in the world. But there's a difference here. Now, the Chelek zwischen sie is the difference between them in what aspect of godliness they reveal in the world is as follows. The Tachlis von Anhagenisis, the point of this, that Hashem performs miracles from time to time, is zum Megala sein dem Bli Gvul von Elikos. This reveals the infinite existence of Hashem, how unlimited Hashem is. He's not bound by any laws of nature, he can break nature. Wie der Rebischer ist den ganzen Hecher von Welt. Hashem is completely higher than anything that's limited in the world. Und das wird Herd in Welt, and this is sensed even here in this world as well, durch ein Bittel von ihr Metzias, when a miracle is performed, and this annuls the whole existence of Teva in the world. So that shows that Hashem is totally above the nature in the world. Their nes, what happens when a miracle happens? Their nes is mishadid di marachas hateva. A miracle will shatter all of the laws of nature. Which reveals the fact that anything in nature does not at all have any place when it comes to the Hashem, which is totally unlimited. That's what a nes reveals, Hashem being unlimited. The tachlis von anhagetivis. On the other hand, what's the purpose of this, that Hashem created nature and performs things according to nature? Is to megala sein. This is to reveal wie der Eibishter is sich mislavish in Welt, that Hashem is invested within this world, as euch de Metzias von Welt, that even every single part of the nature of the world itself is miyuchad mit dem Eibishter, is unified with Hashem. Don't think as Hashem as being otherworldly. He intercedes from this other place that's outside of what exists in this world. No. The world, the Metzias of the world and its nature itself is also one with Hashem. Nature as well is also what Hashem created, and the Metzias. Hashem wanted that there should be a separate, so to speak, Metzias in the world, and this itself is really godly and connected to Hashem. That's the general difference between Nes and Teva. Now the Rebbe will explain how this is connected to the Avodah of a Yid, because everything that happens in the world is all connected to a Yid. We know that the world is created for the purpose of Torah and for the purpose of Yidden. So we must say, as als was is da in the Brie is abhängig in the Avodah von Yidden. So we must say that everything that exists in creation is all dependent on the Yidden. So these two aspects of Nes and Teva is related to the Yidden and to the Avodah of Yidden. And the fun is verstandig. So from this we understand, as nit nor the anhagenisis, not only when it comes to miracles that Hashem performs, which the Medrash clearly says that that's related to the Yidden that Hashem chose. It's totally in Avodas Yisrael, so this is connected and dependent on the Yidden's Avodah. But also this, that Hashem creates the world and He chooses His world, so it's His world even before the Yidden come into existence. The Anhagetivis is Talui in Avodas Yisrael. That's also connected and dependent on the Avodah of Yidden, because from the first moment of creation, the whole entire creation was all for the purpose of Yidden. Nor jede von the Anhagis is abhängig in der Avodas Adam, was is the Gmasa. So each one of these two things, the nature and miracles, Teva and Nes, are related to a specific Aveda of Yidden according to what Teva is and according to what Nisim are. V'seifani Avedas Hashem, teilen sich b'chlalos in zwei Sugim. When it comes to a Yid serving Hashem, just like we divided Teva and Nes, in a Yid's Aveda, you also have corresponding two similar Avedas. By a Yidden, on one hand, by every Yid, darf sein die Tnuah from Kabbalah Seil and Mesiras Nefesh. You must have the foundation of accepting the yoke of heaven, whether you understand it or not, on Mesiras Nefesh, and also total self-sacrifice to give your life away for Hashem. That's one aspect in the Yid's Aveda. And the Rebbe elaborates what this means. Dienen dem Eibishtin, that means to serve Hashem, nit mitzad sein Verstand, not based on your understanding, on regesh and feelings, v'chulu or anything else, nor folgen dem ratzon ha'elyim mit bittul, but rather to listen, to just follow, if you know that this is what Hashem wants, whether you appreciate, whether you relate to it or not, it doesn't matter, to just do what Hashem wants, with an absolute self-nullification. Ubemele is an aveda. If a person has this complete dedication, putting himself aside completely, so then is an aveda nit ken gemastene leidimididis vagbalas from zayim metzias. So his dedication and his service of Hashem is not at all limited or measured by the limitations that the person himself has. Even if he thinks, I'm not ready, I'm not interested, I don't like it, I don't want it, doesn't matter. The person's metzias does not come into play at all. It's an absolute mesiras nefesh. That's one aspect of Aveda. Und der Eifena Aveda is Ma'ere de Anhagenisses. It's this level of Aveda that will draw and awaken that Hashem should respond in kind with a miracle. Was tut Eif, then Bittul und Welt. Because of the miracles that Hashem performs in the world also accomplish the same thing. They annul the whole existence of the nature of the world. Just like the person was mevatel himself, he put himself aside. So this brings about that Hashem should also perform a miracle if necessary to be mevatel whatever disturbance there is to a yid in this world. But you may say, what could be if once a person asks Kabbalah Seil and Mesiras Nefesh, isn't that enough? You need something else? So that besides this, or on the other hand, that's not enough. The ultimate purpose is that even the very entity of the person himself, everything that Hashem put in him, his thinking, his seichel, his midis, cholavavcha, chol nafshecha, his heart, which is both the chol layimani, chol lasmali, the left and the right ventricle of the heart, and chol nafshecha, all of the kaichas of the person, zayin durchgenommen, they should all be permeated mit avedas Hashem, to serve Hashem. Right? The purpose is not just for a person to put himself aside and forget about himself for Hashem's sake. That's one aspect. That's the foundation of bittul. But at the same time, Hashem created a person with all of his complexities that each aspect of the person should be part of this Avedas Hashem. So therefore comes the other part of Aveda, that a person should do Torah and mitzvahs, nit nur mit Kabbalah Seil, not just putting himself aside and just accepting the yoke of heaven, nor euch mit Verstand und Gefühl v'chule, but additionally to involve his understanding, to refine and elevate his understanding and feelings, to be part of this, to appreciate it, to be involved in this Aveda. And then it's this kind of Aveda which is about the entity of the person, that he's dealing with who he is and bringing it into the Aveda, is abhängig der Anhagetivis. Eibishter responds in kind, and this is what nature depends on. Was vereinzigt die Metzias von Welt mit der Lukuskanal? Because what's nature all about? Hashem coming into nature. Hashem being unified with the existence of the world, not Hashem annulling the existence of the world. So this is connected and a result of the Yidden fulfilling Torah and mitzvahs in the world within their Metzias. So we see over here the two anhagas of the world, Nes and Teva, and how this is related to the two kinds of Aveda of a Yid, which is the Aveda of Kabbalah Seil and Mesiras Nefesh, and then the Aveda which is with the Metzias of the person, whether it's Seichel, whether it's his Hergish, and so on. Now what's the purpose over here? Now going back to the point that the Rebbe said before, that the purpose is to the inclusion, to join these two together. their tachlis hakavada is, the ultimate purpose is doch achdus, to create and to bring unity. So that's in general. That's always the purpose, to unify, to bring together. Ubenidden didon, as a soll sein der ichud von Nes and Teva. To bring together these two opposites, seemingly. Nes and Teva, nature and miracles, should come together. And the Rebbe explains, how could you bring these two together? These seemingly are two complete opposites. Nes represents an unlimited revelation that shatters the existence of Teva. Teva represents a limited and lower level of godliness that can be contained within nature. They're not exactly the same source, not the same kind of expression of godliness. So what does it mean that we could unite them together as one? So the Rebbe explains, this that we see that miracles and nature are two opposite ways of Hashem dealing with the world, and the revelation of Hashem is two different ways of Hashem expressing Himself, is nor mitzad oiris v'giluyim. When you look at it from the perspective of expression or revelation of godliness, so then there's two modes of expression, two modes of revelation. And they're like two parallel lines that never meet. They're two separate lines of revelation. In Kav from Bligvul, was kommt up and Anhagenissis. One is Hashem expressing His unlimited power, which is expressed by this, that Hashem performs miracles. Und in Kav from Koiche Begvul. And then Hashem is so unlimited that He also has the power to do and function in a limited way, and to be invested in the world in a limited way. And that's the expression of in Hanogas HaTeva, when Hashem performs matters in the world naturally. So these are two different expressions of godliness that are very different from one another. But that's all in Eiris V'Giluyim, when you speak about expression of Hashem's greatness. But mitzad Yechilas Ha'atzmos. However, if you speak about the power of Hashem Himself, you look at the way these things, where they come from, in their source, in their potential, that it's really all the essence of Hashem here. Zen and Bligvul and Gvul, the unlimited and the limited, nitken svei kaven. These are not like two parallel lines. These are not two separate expressions. Not ein inyan. In their source, it's really all one and the same. Der Ausdruck von Shleimusai. It's the fact that Hashem is so complete and Hashem has everything within Him. The very essence of Hashem Himself is above any definitions, above any description, and therefore you can't describe Him not by Bligvul and not by Gvul either, but at the same time He has all the milas. He has Gvul and Bligvul all at the same time. Hashem is the shleimus of everything. So over there, within the very essence of Hashem, Bligvul and Gvul are not defined as sort of separate expressions. It's all part of Hashem's shleimus, that He has everything, where they're not a contradiction at all. That Ausdruck von Shleimusa, it's just an expression of Hashem's shleimus Himself. There's a famous statement that's brought in Chassidus very often from the Tazria-Hachodesh. If you say that the Eibishter has only the power of being unlimited, and He doesn't have the power to do and to express and to be limited, so then you take away from His shleimus. So in other words, the point of Gvul and Bligvul, if you look at each one of them separately, so each one has its own advantage and its own way, the way it functions and what it expresses. But in the source, Bligvul and Gvul, they're not defined by Bligvul. Bligvul and Gvul are just another shleimus of the Eibishter Himself. Not defined, not by Bligvul and not by Gvul. So in that sense, in that sense, they're both one and the same. An expression of the Eibishter's unlimited power. Undefined power, really. On the Rebbe, so therefore, how do you really have the fulfillment of the full purpose of creation, which is to reveal the essence of the Eibishter in the world, in dem Ichud von Nes and Teva? When you have the fusion of miracle and nature together, so that reveals this truth that Gvul and Bligvul are not two aspects or levels of revelation of Hashem's expression, but it's really the essence of Hashem that's there in nature, and it's there in Nes, because it's really all the Eibishter Himself. That's the point of the union between Nes and Teva. So this is regarding Nes and Teva in the world. And Azayach and Avedis Adam. This is also reflected this way in a person's Aveda. As Manzach von Ayid, it's the mandate of a Yid that his Aveda should also be in such a way that Ichud von die Zwei Fane Aveda. That not only should he have these two aspects of Aveda that we spoke about before, the foundation of Kabbalah Salem Mesiris Nefesh, and at the same time also to bring it into his Metzias, but he should integrate these two Avedas, they should be joined together as one. Mesiris Nefesh, the Kabbalah Salem Shalamayla Mitam V'das. The Mesiris Nefesh and Kabbalah Soil that's totally beyond a person's understanding. On the Aveda Mitzadi Kaiches Pnimiyim. And then the Aveda which is to involve and to include all of his inner Kaiches that he has. You have to bring them both together. Und das wird aufgetan durch die Eiredos von Etzem an Neshama. How is it possible for a person to fuse and to unite these two together as one? That is, when a person taps into an even deeper essence inside the person, the very essence of his Neshama, was mitzadem, zene die beide oifane avede, nit ken hafchim. As far as the essence of the Yid is concerned, they're not opposites, nor adarabbe, bis achtus. When it comes to the very true essence of the Yid, so over there, the Mesiris Nefesh and his own kaiches, which are his mitzias, so seemingly they're opposites. One is bittul and one is mitzias, but mitzad the etzem of the Yid, they're not opposites. Mitzad the etzem of the Yid, the very essence is the very essence of every single aspect of his being, including every single aspect of his mitzias. When you look at externally outside of the etzem of the Yid, so over here you have Mesiris Nefesh, which demands bittul, and then you have who am I? Not who am I not, but who am I? What does my seichel say? What do my midas say? That's an opposite. But when you come to the very etzem, that's the etzem of the Yid. It's the etzem of everything, and they're both united as one. The Rabbi here does not describe exactly how exactly Nes and Teva can be joined together. Practically speaking, what does it mean that Nes and Teva are united as one? There are other places where the Rebbe speaks about it, that a Nes and Teva becomes united as one when the Nes is performed in such a way that it doesn't necessarily totally shatter nature, but it's within nature. We'll see about it a little bit later in the Sikha as well. And the same thing also regarding the Aveda of bringing together the Mesiris Nefesh and also with the Pnimius of the person, the Kaiches Pnimi of the person, how these two Eifanim of Aveda come together. The Rebbe doesn't explain that here either. But it also really means that usually when a person deals with his own Kaiches, with his own thinking, with his own feelings, so that Kabbalah soil sort of takes a back seat. It recedes in the background and you don't have really that feeling of Kabbalah soil at that moment. I'm thinking on my own. But for a person to be able to keep the influence and the power of the Kabbalah soil, and it should be clear in his mind and in his feelings, even when he is dealing with his own understanding and feelings, to fuse those two together, that's a tremendous chiddush, and that comes when the Yid is connected with his very essence of Hashem. So then, in whatever he's doing, he's going to feel these two together, that it's absolute bittul to Hashem, and at the same time, that absolute bittul it elevates and includes my entire mitzias. So that's the point here, to include these two together. Since in essence and in their source, as we explained, Nes and Teva are really all one and the same thing. It's the Yechilis of the essence of the Eibishter himself. It's verstandig, so therefore it's understood, as euch herabkommendig in Ishtalshalus in Welt, that even coming down into a level of Ishtalshalus in the world, vu begolui zenen zei coming out of the source, coming into the place where it's only a revelation of Hashem, and a place of ishtalshalus, where there's the system of nature, or even nisim. So over there are opposites, but even there, since in their source they're always connected, so even after it comes out of its source, you can see this point of what they really are, that they're really connected to one another. That's the chiddush over here that the Rebbe will not continue to explain. That the point is not only that ultimately in their source and the essence of Hashem, Nes and Teva are one, but because in their source they're one, even outside their source, when it comes down into Seder Ishtalshalus, we can see something that will show us that they're really one. And this is expressed by the fact, Euchen dem, was in Teva Gufe, is reingegeben geworden die Tchune voller Meilam and Teva. If you pay close attention to nature, you can see that even within nature itself, there is something in nature that has a character that's above nature. As we'll learn right here in the next sif. And the same is true in the reverse, that Inyan Nes, if you pay attention to what a miracle is verbunden euch mit der Anhages HaTeva. You will see within miracles how miracles are connected to the existence of nature. Could come on Sif Yud Aleph, as we'll see that later in Sif Yud Aleph. So the Rebbe starts to show us how can you see within nature itself a character of a nes, of the concept of a miracle. So the explanation there is, in der Akkade von Gdulasi Yisbarach and Anhagas HaTeva zenen da zwei Fanim. Going back to the point that we said before, what's the point of nature? The point of nature is, it's one way for us to come and recognize Hashem's greatness. You see Hashem's greatness within nature itself. So there are two ways how you can see Hashem's greatness within nature. One is the simple way, which the Rambam says, Aleph durach hasbainenos in the Anhagas HaBriya. Just pay attention to the unbelievable things that happen in nature. All the mazalis, the cycle that happens in the worlds and everything. This itself brings you to the recognition, as it's muzana balabayis lebirazu. Things are running so perfectly, and all these have mazalis and the kechavim and the shemesh and the yireach, all the cycle, everything is mamish so unbelievable. That brings you to the recognition that there's a master to this universe, which is conducting everything in nature. This is what the Rambam describes regarding Avraham Avinu, how he come to recognize Hashem as a creator. He started wandering around and asking and thinking with his understanding, with his mind. How could it be that you have this world that is constantly continuing the way it is, and there is no leader, there is nobody that is causing these things to constantly go on in its motion and its cycle. How is it possible that everything in the world should just be moving in this perfect cycle on its own? So that's simple observance of nature and the sciences of nature. You can come to see that there must be a balabayas lebirazu, that Eibishter creates the world and he's constantly conducting matters in the world. But then there's a deeper point. There's something else that if you observe nature, you can see. If you pay attention to the fact that nature never stops, the fact that it's unchanged, it's a constant hanhaga, that the way nature runs constantly. What do you come to understand from this? How is it possible that you have an existence that's so consistent without any change whatsoever? Where does this really come from? Such an existence that's so strong that never changes, this is impossible that this is something that exists here in the world, just in its nature on its own in the world. Anything that's a created being is created and is constantly deteriorating or is constantly prone to change. And so the source of this cannot be within creation itself, and also not even, so to say, from the Oer Aliki versus Melubish in the Rakbalafenwelt. And the source for this consistency and lack of change in the world can't even be from a level of godly revelation, which is enclosed within the limitations of the world, because if it's a level of revelation that's already lower from the source, and it comes down to be limited to the existence of the world, that's also prone to change. This indicates that there must be an unlimited power of the Eibishter, which was invested here into nature. Which means that not only can a person come to see the existence of Hashem within nature, which would be the level of godliness and clothed in nature or limited to nature, that's the first point, but from nature itself, you could also come and to see the infinite power of the Eibishter. So what do we understand from this? As in Teva Gufe is dar de l'mayla Teva. If you observe nature and you see the consistency of nature, that itself leads you to see the ness, so to speak, within nature, the consistency which is the above Teva within nature, that it's so consistent. The loishanisi for nein seif baruchu. The loishanisi that it says only regarding the Eibishter himself, which is loishanisi. That's how you see the kayach of ness within Teva. Das is the bir and Maimah Chazal. So this will answer our question and explain what Chazal tell us. When Hashem chooses the world, when He created it, so He establishes Rashi Chadashim, the heads of the months of the year, and also the years itself. Now, so if you pay attention here, from Lashon Chazal is move on, it's understood from what Chazal is saying, as da redt sich nit wegen der Matze von Olam mitzad Brias Olam. Even here, Chazal are not speaking about the very creation itself. It doesn't say Mishabara Kadosh Baruch Hu Olam. It doesn't say when Hashem created the world. What does it say? Nor when the Eibishter is Beicher in Welt. Al derech vi bacha be Yaakov v'manav. Just like later it talks about Hashem choosing Yaakov and his descendants, the Yidden, over here as well, when it talks about from the beginning of time, from creation, but it doesn't talk about creation itself. It talks about when Hashem chose creation. What does this mean? What's the significance of Hashem choosing creation? Umitzad bechire davke is kava by Rosh Chodeshim v'Shanim. There's an additional, besides Hashem creating the world, there's an additional level of choice that Hashem reveals and invests in the world, something more, and because of this, Hashem establishes the months and the years. Ahaisafe of them, was es ist da in Olam mitzad atzma mitzad abriya. There's something additional here that Hashem is revealing more than the existence of nature on its own. That's what this Lashon of Chazal, Bachar, hints to. Isn't it move on? So to explain this, so the question really is, so what is the Medrash here referring to? When it speaks about the fact that at the time of creation, when Hashem chose His world, He established the months and the years. So as we learned before, the Hachodesh says, what does this refer to? The Seidet Tivi was der Rebbe eingestellt in Bria. He says that it's referring to the natural order of things that Hashem established in the world. Is this doch a Chelek von der Bria Gufa? So aren't we talking about the nature itself, a part of creation itself, which is the nature of the world? Is es doch a Chelek von der Bria Gufe? So heint, wie kann man sagen, as das kommt davon, was Bachar, a Kadosh Baruch Hu bei Lamai? So why is the Medrash saying that nature, which Hashem established in the world, is connected and is a result of some additional choice or an additional revelation that Hashem brings into the world, which is an additional dimension to creation more than nature itself. But the Hachodesh says that this point of the Medrash here does refer to nature. So why is the Medrash using the term of Bachar, which indicates that it's something that's above nature, something more than just the nature of the world? So the answer is, based on what we said before, that even within nature itself, there is the deeper dimension of nature, which is the essence of Hashem, which is the loishanisi, the consistency of nature. Now the bir in them, so the explanation is, mitzad aminyin from Bachar, HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba'olamai. When the Medrash says that the Eibishter chose His world. Now here the Rabbi gives us the deeper understanding of what the term Bachar means. Was Bechira Amitis is not in Atzmusi is Barach. The true concept of Bechira is only by the Eibishter Himself, Ki Yedua, as it's known. So I'm not going to get into the explanation over here, but the point is that only by the Eibishter Himself is there the real concept of Bechira. Bechira means what you're choosing is two things that are 100% equal. Only by the Eibishter itself is there no advantage or disadvantage to one thing or another, because nothing has any tfisis makim. There is no advantage or disadvantage by the Eibishter Himself, and therefore you have the true concept of Bechira. So when it says Bachar HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba'olamai, what this means is it's referring to the essence of the Eibishter. Is Teva, on Hecher from Teva, ein inyan. So mitzad the essence of Hashem, nature and above nature are really merged together as one. As we said before, that mitzad the essence of Hashem, they are really all one, and therefore on the far is in Teva, even within the nature of the world that Hashem has created, Gufa, in the nature itself, faran der l'mayla min Teva, the nitzchiis von ani avayloi shenisin. This is the second aspect of what you could see within nature, that if you pay attention to the consistency of nature, you'll see that it's unlimited. It has to come from the unlimited essence, presence of the Eibishter Himself within the world. So therefore the point of it here is that you have the creation of the world mitzad atzma. Eibishter created the world, and that's the nature, and that's the first point that Rebbe says. You could see nature for what it is, and you could see the godly, the Eibishter conducting matters within nature. That's the first point. But then there's Bachar HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba'olamai, which means that if you pay closer attention within nature, you'll see that within nature itself, there's a koyach of the consistency of the Eibishter, which is the loishanisi. That's the Bachar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Und das meint me Bachar HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba'olamai kava bei Rosh Chodeshim v'Shanim. When Hashem chooses the world that He created, He establishes Rosh Chodeshim and Shanim. So it mentions here both. it mentions Rosh Chodashim and Shanim, which means das is der Nes Chodesh. It refers to which kind of miracles was is da in dem Inyan von Teva. There's a miracle built in within nature. If you pay close attention to nature, you see the consistency of nature, which is really a miracle, which is the Leishanisi of Hashem. And the Inyan Ashana, which is expressed in the cycle of the year, Moloshin Mishnah, the repetition, Kanal Siv Beis, which means the consistency that Inyan Hadar Hashini, from Hadar Hashini, the lack of any change that there is within the nature of the world. So this is what the Medrash is speaking about when it says, Bachar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not talking about nature itself, but it's talking about the deeper dimension of nature, referring to the unlimited essence of the Eibishter that's here within nature. That's what the Medrash is saying regarding when the Eibishter created the world and shows his world. So just as it's true that within nature, so you have really this consistency which comes from the Inyan of Nes, which is above nature, reflected within nature itself. The same is also true in the reverse. The Anhagen Nisis, when you see Hashem performing a miracle which seems to be shattering the laws of nature, is nit mugbal in the Kafun Nes. It's not limited to being just as a miracle, was drikt eis dem bligwol von Elokos, which expresses the unlimited power of Hashem that has to shatter nature, that can't coexist with nature. Nor in im is euch da der Inyan was Nes macht iberteva. If you pay closer attention to the way a miracle happens in the world, you will see that a miracle is also something that is related to nature, and it has the power to transform nature itself. As teva gufe soll weisen auf ein Hage Elokis. That nature itself also shows on the fact that it's really all godly. And how do we see this in miracles? So there's a few things here that Rabbi points out that you can see regarding when Hashem performs a miracle in the world. Und and therefore, is in Nisim Bechlal Faran Euch der Sug Nisim was an Melubish Ongetan and Teva. You see, regarding miracles, not always are miracles in such a way that it comes and it shatters the laws of nature. You have miracles that happen in the world that they are integrated within nature itself. And you have two opposite extremes regarding this. Das ist ein Nes. On one hand, these miracles that are integrated in nature, they are a miracle like every other miracle that shatters nature. Was is Heche von Teva, which is totally above nature. Punkt wie die Nisim v'zene nit melubishim Teva. Just like any miracle that's not within nature, for example, Kriyas Yamsuf, which is totally against the laws of nature, and a miracle that happens within nature, like for example the Nes of Purim, which happened in such a way that it went through all the natural events that happened, in the essence of this Nes, it's an intervention of a revelation of a Nes, no less. Und wie der Psak Din is, you can see this also even in Halacha, as man macht dieselbe Brache, she'asa nisim, sai b'Chanukah, we make the bracha, she'asa nisim, when we light the menorah regarding Chanukah, which is a nes she'enim ulubish b'teva. That was a nes that was not within nature. And sai b'Purim, and even regarding Purim, which was a nes melubish b'teva, a nes that happened within the natural occurrences that happened as the story is in the Megillah. But we make the same bracha because it's really the same nes. V'adarabah, Chazal actually tell us, as dafka if the nisim amulu bashim b'teva, specifically regarding those miracles that are enclosed within nature that you may think are lower, v'ad gesagt, oisin eflois levadei. Those are wonders that Hashem alone performs, and only He knows of it, and it actually has even a higher source. Aber der Nes Gufe, was ist im ganzen Heche von Teva, when you have a miracle that's totally above nature, kommt herab slapshus in the Darkia Teva, it comes over here, and it gets enclosed within the ways of nature, und tut oif, as the Anhagas HaTeva, Gufe soll sich führen, kiritzayne dafke, kegarzen biyada chaytzav geimer. So here, the Rebbe is talking about the miracles that are enclosed within nature. Although on one hand, it's the same level of a miracle. That's totally beyond nature. But what does it mean that it's enclosed within nature? It has an additional advantage, that it also is able to come down within nature to reveal the truth that even nature itself is part of whatever Hashem decides should be. Like a person that holds a tool in his hands and decides to do with the tool whatever he wants. Nature is Hashem's tool. It has no entity of its own. So what this means is, in der Anhage, Nisis, Shalamayla Menateva, is euch da die Tchune von Teva. So on one hand, we're talking over here about a miracle that's completely above nature. But yet at the same time, it also is integrated within nature. It also has the character of nature to reveal the truth about nature itself. Val nit nar is a nes moishel of Teva ba'ofen, as that is mishadet Teva, because not only could a miracle have this control over nature and break nature and shatter nature, when a nes that's performed, which is really above nature, but it gets integrated within nature, it can elevate and transform the nature itself to be elevated to the level that's above nature. Now that's the nekuda that we see over here, that a nes is not removed of nature. Adarabah, but the nes could come down and be integrated within Teva itself. So now going back to the pasuk, v'yashloima, as das is the time, was Nisan is nitna Rosh Chodashim, the month of Nisan, which is the beginning of the anhaga of miracles. It's the month of redemption. But the pasuk says it's not only the first of all the months of the year, it's also the beginning of the year, which refers to nature. Well, the tachlis from the anhaga Nisis, what's the ultimate purpose of Hashem performing a miracle for Nisan, of the month of Nisan? It's not about shattering the nature and removing nature. No, rather it's to ibermachen the anhaga fun anhaga tivis shana, to transform and elevate nature itself. As euch in Tava soll sich anhören, as es wird geführt von Nisan. That even within nature itself, you should see how it's joined together, that really Teva itself is all connected to the Nes, and it's one with Nes. It's L'mayla Min Teva. Even nature itself is really above nature because it's all connected to the essence of Hashem, where these two are together. So the Teva itself is the essence of Hashem as much as a miracle is. That's the ultimate purpose, and this is what we see here, both in the Medrash when it speaks about Bachar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ba'ilamai, and in the pasuk when it speaks about Hachodesh Lachem, it doesn't stop by Rishonu Lachem by Reish Chodashim, but it continues and says Rishonu Lachem Lachatche Yashana. Okay, so now after all of this, after the Rabbi explained what the ultimate point of a miracle is, that ultimately Nes and Teva are not opposites. Adarabah, the ultimate Nes is when it's joined together with Teva, because that reveals the true essence of Hashem, and they're really all one and the same. So now, Pikal Anal, Vetmunech Verstehen, the Kesher zwischen Parshas Hachodesh and Parshas Tazria. This explains the connection of Parshas Hachodesh and Tazria and why they fall out sometimes on the same Shabbos. The Chelek zwischen Hachodesh and Tazria, so the difference between what Hachodesh represents and what Parshas Tazria represents is al derech the Chelek zwischen Nes and Teva. It's like the difference of the whole discussion here in the Sicha, the difference between Nes and Teva. Hachodesh weist auf Gilui Mul Maila. Hachodesh Kanal Sif Aleph, as we said before, represents the revelation from above. It's Hecha von Evrayim. This is a revelation that comes from above, a miracle that's above nature, above the entity of the world. That's what a nes is all about. Tazria weist auf Avodah Samata. Tazria refers, Kanal Sham, as we said before, to the Avodah, to the Isha Ki Tazria that comes from the Yidden from below. It's verbunden mit Metzias Adam. So that's the Avodah that's related to the entity of the person and what he does, his contribution, and how he elevates himself from below. Al derech in Yinat Teva. This is like the Metzias of the world here below, the union of nature within the world below. So basically, Tazria and Hachodesh are Nes and Teva. Und as Parshas Hachodesh is Chal and Parshas Tazria. So when you have Hachodesh falling out in Tazria, what does that mean? Is es Madgish und der Mond as is en bipnimi esenye. This emphasizes and reminds us that really on a deeper level they're not opposites at all. It's really all one and the same thing. As we learned here by Arichas in the Sicha, that Nes and Teva are all one as far as from the essence of Hashem is concerned. They're really all one and the same thing. This will be revealed in the future when Mashiach comes. And the promise will be fulfilled, Ish v'ish yulad ba. Which means, as vet zayin ish mazriat chila. So on one hand, you'll have a revelation from above. The Eibishter is the ish, and that will the maila was is da in a chaydish was kumpel maila nes. So you have the tremendous advantage of a revelation that comes from above, which is a miracle. That's one ish. Und zusammen damit wird sein v'ish yulad ba, that even though it's a revelation from above, but it will also have the maila that from below the Aveda from below will be b'shleimus, which is the ve'ishu l'ba yeled zachar the maila versus da in Tazria Teva, to reveal the true maila that there is in nature, the asarusa de lasata, which is that the nature is really one with Nes, that the two come together, and therefore it's not going to be yoledis isha, that the nature is sort of out of this, and it's weaker, but no, even nature itself is one with Nes, and they are together as one, and therefore Tazria and Hachodesh are together as one on the same Shabbos.